Hello everyone, lecture 5 in that series of lectures called Thought is Word Dynamics. I've covered before an introduction and chapters 1 and 2. Today we'll deal with chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 is still part of the very initial section in the document I'm reading for, which is called Overall Principles. Chapter 4 is part of the following section called Statics. The remaining two parts in the document are called Dynamics and Implications. What we've said so far is that there must be somewhere that we call memory, a network in our brain, and that network connects not words, individual words, but connects word pairs. And these word pairs are attached to a value, and the value will be essential when we produce a sentence or when we think in our head how to associate word pairs. I claim that it is an affect, emotional value that connects them, and I will justify that in chapter 3. A talking subject experiences the dynamics as being affective. A thoroughly physical account of the objective dynamics of speech performance will be provided later. In the meantime, we indicate that as far as the talking subject is concerned, its subjective experience of the dynamics of speech performance, is from the initiation of a speech act to its conclusion, one of an emotional or affective nature. The view commonly held is that emotions hinder the expression of rational thinking. It is true that beyond a certain threshold, emotion may turn into various forms of disarray and impair speech performance. In normal circumstances, however, the expression of one's feelings, which is the spontaneous way people describe the motive behind their speech acts, results in rational discourse. The reason why is that the network underlying speech performance is structured, channeling speech performance along branching but constrained paths in such way that the expression of one's feelings engenders out of necessity one or more series of meaningful sentences. In lecture number 4, I examined as a possibility and possible hypothesis that words are in our memory like in a big bag without any structure whatever, that they're lying there, then we produce a sentence. We go and pick whatever we need at the time, on the spot, live. It's much more coherent, and it was already noticed by Aristotle as the main possible organization of our mind, that words are pre-organized in that network, that there are some association, and it was Aristotle who suggested that the storage would be of word pairs and not individual words, that we put things together. But the meaning that the same word can appear in different pairs. And I gave as an example precisely apple and oranges, and apple and Eve, the famous apple of Eve. We connect that we store probably that in our mind at a different place where we put apples, which are like pears, or oranges, which are fruit. I'll come back to all that. The network underlying speech performance is structure, channeling speech performance along branching but constrained paths in such way that the expression of one's feelings engenders out of necessity one of more series of meaningful sentences. People claim they speak to express their feelings or to relieve themselves, to get something out of their system, and such is indeed the subjective experience of speech performance. Talking subjects experience a situation ranging from minor to serious dissatisfaction, the causes of which we'll investigate further on, and talk their heart out until, having reached the end of an outburst of speech, they feel relieved, feeling once again of a satisfied mind. Until that is, of course, some renewed source of minor irritation launches the dynamics all over. We will show that from an objective point of view, the dynamics is no doubt better described as the reaching of a potential well within a word space under a minimization dynamics, but it can also justifiably be described as an affective dynamics. As for the talking subject, this process is experienced as one of emotional relief. Also, the parameter determining the dynamics of the gradient descent within the world space are the affect values associated, or affect values or emotional values associated with the words in the word space that the network constitutes. What I'm reading you there was initially written between 1987 and 1990, and at that time the way I was proceeding in artificial intelligence by saying that the process of generation of sentences was a gradient descent, using therefore a physical model where we were trying to relieve tension, here in this case affect values or emotional values, and to reach a point of satisfaction where we don't have to say anything because we're relieved, we've spoken our heart, and we're done with what we wanted to say until the process is relaunched by you telling me something else, and or within my inner thinking, my inner speech, something else comes up and I want to express myself. What I'm saying there was new. It was inspired by psychoanalysis, of course, but it was inspired by the psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic theory of Freud, the very early one, where he was just dealing with ideas in like a physicist with currents and electricity potentials and so on. It's in the Sketch of Psychology that he wrote in the years 1895, never published. They were published finally in the 1950s when they were rediscovered. So much for the first section, overall principles. Now dealing with statics, and the chapter 4 says the following: the network comprises a subset of the words, the content words of a particular natural language. Here we have to make distinctions. Here we go into somewhat into linguistics, because not every language is the same in the respect of what I'm going to say now. In Indo-European languages, there are two types of words. Every locutor has a very strong intuitive feeling of this. We had no difficulty when defining the meaning of offering a definition of words of the first type. Example: a rose is a flower that has many petals, often pink, a strong and very pleasant fragrance, a thorny stem, etc. A tire is a rubber envelope to a wheel inflated with air, etc. With the second type, we're in real trouble. Here's an example. The word nonetheless is used when one wishes to suggest that while a second idea may, at first sight, look contradictory to one first expressed, it is, however, the case, etc., etc. When trying to define a word like nonetheless, I typically cannot resolve myself to say that it means something. I'd rather claim, like I did a few moments ago, that it is used when, and revealingly I'm forced to express this usage by quoting, if not a true synonym of it, at least as with however, a word which is used in very similar contexts. The first type of words are often called content words. The second are called framework or structure words. Not every language deals with such distribution of content and framework words in a very similar way. Languages like Chinese and Japanese are much more sparing in their use of framework words than Indo-European languages are. Archaic Chinese, for one, had very few of those, and meaning was emerging essentially from the bringing together without further qualification of content words, if needed with added strategically set pauses to put things together, to suggest some more elements of meaning. Pauses were used, and small words connecting things, like for saying that there's a strong link with this or that, and so on. Dictionaries have an easy time with the first type of words, like apple, and a rotten time with the second. doing like done here with nonetheless, resorting to the cheap trick of referring to a closely related word, the meaning, the usage of which the reader is supposedly more familiar with. The British philosopher Gilbert Ryle interestingly called the first type of words topic committed. The content words are topic committed, and the second are topic neutral, the words of structure, the structure words or framework words. He wrote, "We may call English expressions topic neutral if a foreigner understood them, but only then could not get a clue at all from an English paragraph containing them what that paragraph was about." If we put these, if we try to make a paragraph or a whole page of just these structure or framework word, it's impossible to know exactly what one is talking about. They are connecting things, they are putting things together, and so it's impossible to understand that any content being related to them. In the technically unambiguous language used by the medieval logicians, the first words, the content words, were called categoremes, and the second were called syncategoremes, like in syntactic or syntax. Intuitively speaking, we can understand this as meaning that content words are essentially concerned with telling us what is the category, the kind, the sort of things we're talking about, while the second type of words, the framework words, are essentially playing a syntactic role, a mortar type of role, which would explain why we're at trouble explaining what they mean and feel more comfortable describing how they are being used. The network we're talking about is made of content words. These are the building blocks of a network where roses connect with red and violets with blue. The other words, the framework words, are not part of this network. They're stored in a different manner. They're summoned to make the content words stick together as the mortar of a particular kind that will make these words or these combinations of words work together within a clause, within a sentence. Like what was mentioned in an attempt to give a definition for nonetheless, that it is used when the two states of things which are brought together may seem at first sight to be contradictory. In order to ease the clash, to relieve the affective discomfort that comes when contradictory states of affairs are brought together, a word like nonetheless is pasted between the belligerents. With nonetheless, the state of affairs evoked come from distant places in meaning space with discrepant electrical charges. Bringing them together creates an imbalance that needs to be resolved. The talking subject, who is connecting in his speech the states of affairs that are on either side of the nonetheless, cringes. So he or she stuffs between them a contradiction insulator, between inverted commas, or a compatibility patch like nonetheless, and everything is once again fine. An example, the Duke knew that his best interest, and the princess's too, was that he wouldn't try to see her again. Nonetheless, the following morning, the nonetheless in that sentence relieves my worry. I won't care for that Duke anymore. If he's that kind of fool, well, good for him. What do I care? Framework words are part of what we will call the coatings that make out of the words found in a finite path along the network a proper sentence when speech is being generated, inner speech or outer speech, when I speak to you, for example. Here we go. This is the end of lecture 5. See you soon, and thank you for your patience and interest so far, for having been as far as lecture 5. Thank you so much.